Operation Tiger, often called the forgotten chapter of World War II, was a secretive mission so large that an entire English coastal town was evacuated to make way for it. The Allies were planning something monumental that required utmost precision and secrecy. The invasion of Normandy. This endeavor demanded meticulous planning and a live-fire training. Mission to prepare troops and support ships for the landing. The plans for Operation Tiger and, consequently, Operation Overlord were not only classified but closely guarded secrets known to only a select few, informally referred to as bigots. Still, the Germans watched the English Channel closely, ready to strike. At unexpected hours, they would slip into the training area and remind the Allies what real war felt like. Operation Overlord was the largest offensive strategy devised by the Western Allies against German forces. Its aim was a decisive assault from northern France to free Western Europe from Nazi occupation. The initiative officially began on June 6, 1944, with Operation Neptune. Over 1,200 airborne teams and about 5,000 vessels stormed the Normandy beaches. Before launching such a massive operation, the Allies wanted to make sure execution would be precise and disciplined. To that end, they developed a comprehensive rehearsal called Operation Tiger to improve coordination and communication among Allied units. In 1943, the British government set up training grounds at Slapton Sands in Devon because the terrain closely resembled the designated sectors, such as Utah and Omaha Beach. Nearly all of the roughly 3,000 local residents were evacuated. Operation Tiger was conducted in strict secrecy and under careful supervision. The start date was kept confidential until the last possible moment. Every aspect of the invasion plan was rehearsed with infantry, tank landing ships, and live-fire exercises. In essence, the operation gave the Allies a close approximation of what Overlord would entail without actually engaging the German forces. In late 1943, strategic focus shifted toward the Western Front, and German naval thinking emphasized aggressive action to counter Allied plans. German E-boats' fast attack craft posed a significant threat in the Channel and coastal waters, able to switch targets quickly and strike with precise timing. With German forces anticipating an Allied invasion in the Channel and the Atlantic, preparing for enemy small boat attacks was crucial. Operation Tiger specifically aimed to ready force you for the planned landing at Utah Beach. In the spring of 1944, Allied Supreme Headquarters finalized plans on April 19, 1944. Placing the U.S. Navy in operational control of the exercise, while leaving final authority with the Royal Navy in case cancellation or reduction became necessary. A U.S. Rear Admiral was tasked with preparing servicemen for this realistic but dangerous rehearsal, with Royal Navy destroyers, corvettes, and trawlers providing escort and cover. The exercise sought maximum realism. Force U used the exact gear they would employ at Utah Beach, and cruisers and destroyers fired live rounds over the trainees' heads, using the same vessels slated for deep. Because of the inherent danger, the U.S. and Royal Navies maintained radio silence during Operation Tiger, breaking it only in cases of immediate peril, often too late to prevent disaster. The operation was scheduled from April 22 to April 30, and the initial days proceeded smoothly with marshalling drills until the 25th. In the lead-up to the mission, crews of the landing ship tanks, LSTs, diligently readied their trucks, tanks and vehicles, ensuring everything was fully fueled for the training exercise. They departed on April 24, 1944, and, alongside other LSTs from Brixham and Plymouth, formed Convoy T bound for Slapton Sands. Unbeknownst to them, German forces were closely monitoring. Hitler's Directive 51 had positioned elements of the German Navy near the English Channel, and on April 25, German reconnaissance aircraft spotted a massive military buildup around Portsmouth. More than 200 trucks, numerous ships including destroyers, troop transports and LSTs, and many land vehicles. Intelligence estimated tens of thousands of soldiers were being readied for action, and German officers informed Berlin on April 26, a day before the exercise. With growing confidence that an Allied operation was imminent, That evening, Allied assault troops began embarking on transports and carried out simulated maneuvers resembling the Channel crossing near Lyme Bay. As Convoy T4 sailed toward Lyme Bay, the crews remained unaware that their meticulous preparations were being scrutinized by the enemy, a fact that set the stage for what followed. On April 27th, the practice assault, led by Rear Admiral Don P. Moon, involved 221 vessels off England's south coast. Live ammunition was discharged over the troops to accustom them to the sights, sounds and smells of the battlefield, a strategy strongly endorsed by General Eisenhower. HMS Hawkins was ordered to shell the beach with live rounds between 6:30 and 7:30 a.m. But an American admiral postponed naval live firing by 1 hour and failed to notify the officers in charge of the landing ships. That miscommunication caused the first major setback. Troops disembarked while the bombardment was still ongoing, and reports from British Marine vessels suggested contingency plans were faltering, leaving soldiers on the shore uncertain whether they were still in a drill or facing a real error. Even so, more severe problems were about to unfold. At 9:45 a.m. on April 27th, Convoy T4 set out from Plymouth for Lyme Bay to transport American tanks and troops to Red Beach at Slapton Sands. From the outset, the convoy faced difficulties. One of its two escorts, HMS Sitter, could not join after colliding with an American landing craft for tanks, LC, leaving HMS Aaliyah, commanded by Lieutenant Commander George C. Geddes of the Royal Navy, as the sole escort. The reduction in escort was not communicated to higher command. The breakdown only became clear later that evening. Overall command of Convoy T4 rested with Commander Bernard Skill of the U.S. Navy aboard LST 515. Both officers were well aware of the threat posed by German I-boats. Their speed and agility demanded constant vigilance, but the diminished escort was ill-equipped to counter that danger. Additional defenses had been set up from Start Point to Portland Bill, and 3 motor torpedo boats MTBs were stationed near Cherbourg to intercept any E-boats leaving base. Despite these measures, at 10 p.m. on the 27th, the 5th and 9th Schnellboot flotillas, comprising 6 and 3 boats respectively, managed to slip past the British MTBs, traveling at high speed and maintaining radio silence. The Schnellboot breached the outer defensive screen across Lyme Bay. British radar detected E-boats near Convoy T for that night, and crew aboard one of the LSTs also observed them, but no immediate action was taken. It was assumed the unidentified craft might belong to another Allied convoy. Coastal gunners, following orders to withhold fire, did not engage, and although HMS Aaliyah was aware of the U-boats, it refrained from defensive action at that time. HMS Saladin was assigned as a relief escort and departed Start Bay, but it arrived too late. After 1:30 a.m., while the group of LSTs was underway, green traces and gunfire suddenly appeared. Lieutenant James Murdoch and his crew on LST 507 sounded the alarm, but the attack was inevitable. 2 enemy craft, S-130 and S-150, closed in and launched torpedoes. S-130's torpedo struck LST 507's auxiliary engine room. The explosion plunged the ship into darkness and triggered a raging fire that spread across the deck, where vehicles and equipment were stored. Gas tanks and ammunition began to detonate. The heat became unbearable, and the situation rapidly grew desperate. Less than 30 minutes after the torpedo hit, the order was given to abandon ship. As LST 507 burned and chaos spread, communication with the other LSTs broke down. The convoy became disorganized. Radio queries went unanswered, and the rest of the ships continued on, unaware of the unfolding disaster. At 2:17 a.m., LST 531 burst into flames after being hit by 2 torpedoes. Even as she sank, she returned fire, but most of her crew were lost. The 6 remaining LSTs zigzagged desperately, crews firing machine guns and cannons into the dark. LST 289 engaged one of the enemy boats, but suffered damage when S-145 launched a torpedo that struck her stern, damaging the rudder, stern guns and crew quarters. Despite the hits, LST-289 managed to reach shore. The other vessels moved into shallower water for safety. The water, slick with oil and strewn with debris, was icy about 42 degrees Fahrenheit, 9 degrees Celsius, and men clung to floating wreckage to stay alive while fighting hypothermia. LST-289, which had been ahead of LST-507, was also struck by a torpedo, becoming the third ship hit. Though badly damaged, she stayed afloat. The remaining LSTs followed orders and made for the nearest port. The E-boats that had attacked then withdrew. Captain John Doyle of LST-515, the convoy lead, disobeyed orders and turned back into danger to rescue survivors. His crew pulled roughly 134 men from the sea and continued rescue efforts until dawn. When HMS Onslow arrived to assist, the invasion plans were so highly classified that all related documents were labeled BIGOT, and only a tiny circle of personnel held that clearance. The morning after Operation Tiger was chaotic and grim. 10 of the men with access to the Overlord plans, the so-called bigots, were killed, and the Allies briefly considered postponing D-Day for fear the plans might have been compromised. The remains of the 10 were later recovered. In the operation's aftermath, the Allies made several practical changes. Radio frequencies were standardized. Better life vests were issued to landing troops, and smaller craft were designed to help survivors. The events at Slapton Sands remained secret until August 1944, with medical staff, survivors and participants bound to silence under threat of court-martial. Operation Tiger, long called the Forgotten Chapter of World War II, underscored the risks, confusion and sacrifice that accompanied preparations for the Normandy landings. Asterisk.